Hello and welcome to Eye on Oakland. I'm Chuck Moss, your host, coming through the virtual magic. And we've got a great guest today, David Dulio, one of our favorite people, a distinguished professor, Oakland University, Center for Civic Engagement. I think does that cover it? There's probably a lot more, but
That
welcome
covers
back.
it. That covers it. Thanks.
All right, you know the political world as good as anybody who's been around. So I got a quick question here: what's going on?
I think and excuse me.
What's not going on?
I've been sick all weekend, so we're doing this show, and I'm just getting over some kind of cold or virus. So if I cough or sneeze, you have to forgive me. Same for your guests. And I think you just nailed that, Chuck. It's not what's happening; it's what's not happening. There is so much. Every time I think, okay, I've seen it all, or this is it. Something else happens, right? I mean, it's just unlike any other time that I can remember in American politics.
And now I'm going to sort of date myself and maybe you. Worse than 68? I mean, I was 14 in 1968, and the candidates were getting shot. So,
well, and 68 was before my time, so you dated me somewhat. And that's fair, I think that we could also go back to, well, let me put it this way. I think in many respects, it's unlike any time we've ever seen before in terms of vitriol and rancor, violence, right? I think 68 is there. But in terms of what some would call negativity or rancor, go back to the 1860s and what people said about Abraham Lincoln in that campaign, and it would make people blush to even today. So in some respects, it's not as bad as it's ever been, but in many respects, I think it is. And just in terms of the swirl that is there, and I have to think that the access to information, the social media, 24-hour news cycle, all of that contributes to the environment and context in which we're living.
it's kind of amazing. I years and years ago, writing columns for the Detroit News, I think I said that somehow we've grown this insane nervous system, and without the brain to handle it, with the stimulus, and it's like some weird animal that freaks at everything. So let's get some specifics. Is the Michigan Republican Party totally in the ditch? I mean, it seems to me like it's in the ditch and it's still trying to off-road in a Kia,
Yeah, I think that some of the worst fears about the status of the party coming out of the most recent leadership elections are starting to come to fruition, right? I think the fact, and I'll just give you two examples from where I sit, certainly outside of any decision-making circles, or I'm just sort of reading the tea leaves based on what I read in the newspaper. But number one, well, maybe three. We'll go with three. I think they're having trouble raising money, which is going to be a real problem, and feeds into the next two, right? The party can't seem to find a high-profile U.S. Senate candidate to take on Alyssa Slotkin, who is well, she's not the only Democrat in the race, but she's the odds-on favorite to win that primary. And I think that there's real big questions about how they're going to handle the presidential primary, given that RNC rules would permit one thing in terms of the date of the 2024 presidential primary. But of course, as you know, Michigan, the legislature has established a different date that would violate Republican National Party rules. And one of the solutions there is for the MRP to have a caucus or a convention, but their question is, do they have the funds to pay for it? So I think that there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the MIGOP right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hate to put it, let's put it this way. I mean, let's face it, I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican. I run. Is the Michigan GOP basically becoming the Bud Light of politics? It's a brand gone kaput, or at least at the state level.
Well, I think that with the right messenger, the Michigan Republican Party could be in fine shape, right? I think that it's not necessarily the party brand. I think it's the questions really surround the direction that Christina Caramo and her other leadership allies are going to take the party, and we'll have to wait and see, right, what comes of that.
Well, I think the parties are both reinventing themselves. I mean, the Reagan coalition, that was almost 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Things have changed. For instance, I find the old Christian right is basically gone. The mood of the party, if you will, is very libertarian. It's like, I mean, the dreaded homosexual. Oh my God, I mean, that's over. Nobody cares about that anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, guess what? It wasn't the end of society, of integration of gays. So, it's you've got a whole new era reinventing itself. I guess I'm going to ask, who represents the normies? Who represents the normal people? The old silent majority. Nobody seems to really be talking to them.
I think that's a really great point, Chuck. And I would say a couple things about that. Number one, I think both parties are really focused on their base, and that of course leaves out the normies, right? That leaves out the folks in the middle, or who consider themselves moderates or independents, right? And I think that in the actions of both the Republicans and the Democrats, I think at the state level and the national level, you see that taking place, right? I mean, take here in Michigan, right? Of course, Democrats have a very successful 2022 election and win across the board and take control of Lansing for the first time in 40 years, so that they control all the levers of power. And I think that some of the things that they have passed have been aimed at their base, and you got to wonder, okay, is that going to come back to bite them in the down the road? And I think that the national Democrats are doing some of the same things. That one of the best pieces of campaign advice that I've heard somebody give it comes from a Democratic political consultant. I won't name him, but I'll cite him. And he just said, be less crazy than the other guy, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to these days.
Well, there was a politician who said for the Republican nomination is you can't win the nomination without the conservatives, but you can't win the election with only the conservatives.
Right.
It was Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
So this goes back a long way. My guess is, I never had much to do with state party. They always seemed very Lansing struck, and they didn't have a clue southeast of Williamston. But it seems like this political era has ended. It was the John Engler age, if you will, and it started in 1991. It's been over 30 years. These things run in cycles, and the GOP is going to have to figure it out. But I'm telling you, what we call normies, or what I'm calling them, these are full of groups you wouldn't normally think that would vote. For instance, Hispanics, if you will, which is a very large, group of people, with different things. And gay, from what I've seen, gays and lesbians are mainly they're middle class. They like everybody else. If you see, legal immigrants, what we call Asian, which could be anybody from Vladivostok down to Tel Aviv. Parents, this is everybody. And you can't sell Christina Carmano, and you can't sell the grassroots to these guys. They don't care. You're not talking to them.
Right. I think that's a signal, of where the party is right now is really about the successes that the Trump wing of the party had in 2016 and beyond in gaining control of precinct delegate spots, and then county party organizations. And then, of course, it has blossomed here in 2023 to have, that wing of the party seemingly controlling the entirety of the Michigan GOP.
Well, yeah, except, they've talked. One guy says, we're the grassroots. This is a couple of months ago. I said, okay, if you're the grassroots, where's the grass? I mean, you don't see any grass. I mean, look, it's all just bare. Maybe you're the roots, but you haven't come up with anything.
So I think that's a good point, right? Because I am of the opinion that that the folks that are in control of the party organizations, and that I think goes from the MIGOP on down to the county and precinct levels, are not reflective of the broader Michigan Republican Party, the Republicans in Michigan, right? Because it is a wider coalition than just those folks. That includes normies that you're talking about, right? I think that if you look, Republicans have had successes in some demographic groups that they haven't had so much before. I mean, look at and this is going to sort of change the track here, but
that's okay.
Look at the successes that Ron DeSantis had in Florida last time around. He won everywhere, right? With a message that was about some of the things that you're talking about, right? And aimed at some of the groups that you're talking about, parents, Hispanic Americans, right? And he won everywhere and just dominated Charlie Crist. And he's not a crazy Democrat. In fact, I think he used to be a Republican, right? I mean, it's crazy to think about.
Yes. Well, it's that there's this thing called the middle. And I do know that, in my career, I could never sell that really right stuff of the grassroots. I couldn't sell that. My district didn't even try.
No. And in Birmingham's a really interesting place, right? Because it has now shifted, and it's a Democratic, not stronghold, but it's a Democratic place now, right? Because I think that some recent candidates have made it difficult for folks in places that used to be tried and true Republican territory, made it difficult for folks to vote for some of those people.
Well, they'd vote for Reagan, they'd vote for, but they got a lot of people that are not going to vote for Trump. They're just not. They don't want to hear it. So you just say, no, I'm not, but I stand for A, B, and C. They'll do it.
Yeah.
It could be that, I don't know that Trump can reinvent himself, but first of all, he doesn't want to try. So he's
oh
gonna
gosh, no.
He's going to be doing what he's doing. And he might even win. I don't know. But before we take our break, just real quick, is Oakland County Democrat forever?
I don't think so. I think that Republicans have an opportunity with the right candidate and the right message. And you mentioned Trump, and I'll point you to the simple fact that in his Senate race in 2020, John James got a higher percentage of the vote in Oakland County than Trump did, and got more raw votes out of Oakland County than Trump did. So I think that is a signal that, again, the right candidate with the right message can be an attractive option for folks in Oakland County. Now, a bigger problem, I think, is the fact that Tudor Dixon lost to Gretchen Whitmer in 22 by a margin of 145,000 votes. That is a crusher of a result, and that it not only signals problems in Oakland County, but statewide. Republicans can't win statewide with that kind of gap. They may
not be able to win statewide with a candidate that's number 6 in the list because the top 5 got thrown out because of bad petitions.
Also very true.
In 1972, the comedy group Firesign Theater had a fake run, and the candidate who said he just ran his platform was not insane, which was kind of not bad for those days. Well, we're going to take a break. We're talking with Dave Dulio, distinguished professor, Oakland University Center for Civic Engagement. We'll talk about the Democrats and maybe go national. I'm Chuck Moss. Don't go away. We'll be right back here on Eye on Oakland. Welcome back to Eye on Oakland with Dave Dulio, distinguished professor, Oakland University, and the Center for Civic Engagement. I remember when you were chairman of the poli-sci department. Got a question now. We've been really beating up on the Republicans. On to the Democrats. They are enjoying certainly a nice season right now, but I don't know. I don't know. They seem to have turned their back on a lot of their former constituent groups. Do you see them with an uninterrupted era of dominance?
I don't. I think that Democrats need to be careful not to overreach in the remaining months and year of their first time in control of all things Lansing. I think that we tend to forget, or we can forget, that Michigan is not a one party state, right? I mean, certainly Democrats control everything, right? They had as we said in the last segment, right? They had a wonderful electoral victory in 2022, but those House and Senate majorities are razor thin, and it's only going to take in 2024 the flipping of a couple of seats for Republicans to take back majority in the House, and then in 2 years after that, we've got the Senate up, and again, only a couple seats that would need to go the other way, when there were a handful that were decided by less than 1,000 votes in both the House and the Senate races. So I think that Democrats need to, it'll be really interesting to see what they do the remainder of this legislature, right? Where they've gotten a lot of their high profile stuff through and onto the governor's desk. Well, now what do they do next, right? Do they kind of pivot and go back to the normies that we're talking about and try to address maybe some more of those kitchen table issues that I think folks are looking for in terms of common sense solutions to everyday problems, or do they continue to sort of go to their base and look for even more sort of payoff victories, if you will, for folks that have backed them for years and years?
Unions. You keep saying unions. Yeah, I mean, it looks to me like they've just really rammed the clock back as far as they can go to try to make it 1950 forever for the unions. And I see unions as essentially, in their current form, a spent force. But here's the deal. I mean, California wasn't a one-party state either, but they changed the structure. Now, the Democrats did not in Michigan win the situation that they had prior to this year. They, through the amendment process, changed the playing field very, very seriously. So now my question is, with all the changes that they made, the gerrymander, and that's what it turned out to be through the commission and all, have they structurally set it up so they can't be voted out? Yes, a governor can come and win or not win, but the legislature, has that been structurally changed so the Democrats can't really lose?
I don't think so. I think that there are enough competitive districts where Republicans can hold majorities in both the House and the Senate. I think that what that could produce, right, is just this flip flop back and forth of one 2 year period has got Democrats in control and then Republicans in control for 2 years. And that doesn't, I don't think that sets up for very good policy making, because you can have this sort of windshield wiper effect. But I think what they did in the commission was, and we can argue about whether or not they followed the mandates of the constitutional amendment and the criteria that were set forth in the ballot proposition. But I think what they did was draw districts that are linked to the statewide aggregate vote for House and Senate candidates, right? So, Democrats won the aggregate vote statewide for state House races, pretty much 51-49, and the same in the Senate last time around. And that's kind of the outcome of the chambers, right? They got basically a one vote majority in both houses, and I think that's what they were really after. But to do that, you use the word gerrymander, and I would use the same thing. I think it's just a different kind of gerrymander that we got. We got a map that's gerrymandered to produce, in some places, competitive districts. And that is what's going to lead, I think, in the next 8 years, right? While we're working under these maps, it's going to lead to potentially back and forth control of certainly the House.
Well, I know that, for instance, Birmingham now goes down to
I-96. Yeah.
I don't know how you run in that kind of district.
I don't either. And there are a number of those districts in Oakland County and just to the east in Macomb that go from the suburbs down into the city of Detroit. And I had a colleague of mine describe them as bacon strip districts. And I think that's a pretty good descriptor.
Like the old French lines of property, they go from the river out to Hamtramck.
Right on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that they talked about community of interest. And I understand, I've quite have heard that the Detroit delegation was absolutely livid about this. And I don't blame them. Don't blame them a bit. I think it decreased minority representation up at the state level too. And I don't know how that doesn't violate the Voting Rights Act. But
I'm not an attorney. I think you can certainly ask those questions. And I think some Democrats in Detroit absolutely did ask those questions when they filed a lawsuit right after the maps were produced. I believe that one of those lawsuits, maybe two of them, are still active. So we'll see how those turn out. But I've heard others describe the maps, the state house and state senate maps, as a racial gerrymander. In another direction that wouldn't, that provides, not provides, it actually takes away, right, representation from African Americans in the city. So this is just another lesson in what redistricting is all about, right? And gerrymandering is in the eye of the beholder. It's almost any map can be described as a gerrymander.
Well, the rumor was in 2010 that the people who were putting the map together, the Republicans, essentially went to the Detroit delegation and said, "Look, you guys draw your own maps. We don't want to violate voting rights. We don't want to decrease minority representation. Just draw your own maps. Give them to us. We'll make it work." Now, I have no idea whether that's true or not, but that would have been a very smart move to make. Is that look, we don't want to decrease minority representation by any means, to leave us open. On the other hand, as far as it being favoring Republicans, it was. Although we lost some districts here in Oakland, the district I represented went Democrat, so it couldn't have been too gerrymandered. So let's talk about the Democrats. I think they have a problem because they too have turned their backs on the normies, middle class. I think middle class is also in there, although normies, as far as I'm concerned, goes far beyond that. The Democrats don't, at least nationally, seem to be, I don't know where they're going, unless you want to think it's nowhere good.
I don't know, Chuck. I think that it's fascinating to watch. Let's just take this debt ceiling battle that we've got brewing between the White House and the U.S. House with Speaker McCarthy and President Biden, right? I mean, I think that any American that looks at this and says, okay, if I tried to manage my household like this, I would be in deep trouble. How can they keep raising the limit without trying to find ways to cut back? I think that just makes too much sense for those normies. And I think the White House is playing with fire here on how this is going to be interpreted.
Unless they don't care. I mean, who's running the White House? I don't know. I can't, you knew that Donald Trump was definitely the boss. Whether he gave an order and it got obeyed is another matter. But with Biden, I don't even know if Biden knows if it's Tuesday or Czechoslovakia.
Oh my gosh. I think, I think they're also playing with fire when they look at Joe Biden as the answer in 2024, right? And that's not just me saying that, right? There are I mean, poll after poll after poll of Democrats says, yeah, we're not sold on this guy. Maybe we should try to find somebody else. But their problem is, who's next, right?
Kamala Harris.
Which and as you know, her numbers are even worse than the president's. And then you start going down the list, and frankly, you don't have to go too far down the list until you get to Gretchen Whitmer.
Well, Gretchen Whitmer, she's. We'll see. I mean, we'll see. I do know that Kamala Harris has a great career ahead of her as like a new age guru. I mean, all these things that she says would make perfect sense if you had, like tinkling charms and maybe some chakra stuff. She didn't really say today is the first day of the rest of your day, but she might as well have. What I said that, but the thing is that the Dems. I mean, it seems like are the liberals still around, or is it all just Marxists now?
Well, I think maybe, and I hate to sound all political theory-ish on us here, but
that's okay.
Well, I mean, there's probably some neoliberalism in there somewhere. It's sort of beyond what you and I would think of as the traditional liberal Democrat, right? And I think that's been a transition that's been underway for several years, right? When you think about the move from even the label of liberal to progressive, right?
Yeah.
And the shift from the old Ted Kennedy days, the liberal line of the Senate, is that around anymore? I'm not so sure when you've got folks like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren really controlling a lot of the narrative around the Democratic Party, and even Chuck Schumer for that matter.
Yeah, well, the progressives are just rebranding. I say they're just rebranding socialists or communists, whatever. The bottom line is it's because they're authoritarian. I don't know. We're going to real quick. The media suicide, and I'm going to just call it that, has left a real gap. Where do you go for information other than this show and chuckmoss.com?
I go everywhere. I think I assume that politics is everywhere. I assume that bias is everywhere. So I try to find a broad spectrum of information and then piece it together from there. Figure that if I read enough things, I can probably triangulate what the truth is.
Well, good. No one should believe any one source anymore. I mean, Walter Cronkite blew the biggest story of his career, and we lost the Vietnam War. Thank you very much. So it's good we don't believe one guy. But you should. Do you have a blog? Do you have one?
I don't. I don't. I have eschewed social media because I think it's a cesspool for a lot of reasons, and so I stay away from a lot of that.
Yeah, you're smart. I mean, I'm in it, but what can I say? Anyway, all right. Well, this has been great. One last word going forward into 2024. Trump or Biden?
Boy, if it's Trump Biden rematch, I mean, there are going to be a ton of disappointed and disgruntled Americans out there if that is the choice that we have.
And it could be worse. It could be Nixon McGovern.
Well,
George Wallace is the third one. All right. Well, thank you for joining us here on Eye on Oakland. Dave Dulio, a distinguished professor, Oakland University Center for Civic Engagement. I'm Chuck Moss. Thank you for joining us here on Eye on Oakland.